and Dave Schwartz. Would you like to introduce our speaker this morning? Our speaker is Steve Wenick. And David?
First of all, I'd like to thank Steve Wenick. I've known him for a number of years. He was nice enough to join me at one of our men's club breakfasts in recent years over at Lionsgate, where he made a very interesting presentation. So Steve, thanks so much for joining us on such short notice. And the bio is as follows. Steve and his wife, Bobby, live in Voorhees. They have 3 daughters, one of which made Aliyah 28 years ago. He also has 8 grandchildren, of which 5 live in Israel, all of whom served in the IDF. One is still on active duty in the paratrooper brigade. That, along with having an Israel great-granddaughter, explains why he has been to Israel 58 times. Since retiring from IBM as an IT systems analyst, Steve has served as a freelance book reviewer for HarperCollins Publishing. His reviews have appeared in the Jerusalem Post, the Times of Israel, Olga Minor, the Philadelphia Inquirer, Attitudes Magazine, and the Voice of Southern New Jersey. He has written scores of articles, most of which deal with topics of Jewish interest: the Holocaust, Judaism, and Israel. And thank you very much.
So first, thank you, David, for giving me the opportunity to talk about my favorite subject, Israel. When David first asked me to speak, I immediately said yes, and then I realized there's so much I can talk about that I wouldn't know where to start and when to stop. But I thought it over, and I'll try to make this as focused as possible. My love of Israel started in 1959. At that time, I was a volunteer on a kibbutz called Kibbutz Shluchot. Shluchot actually means branches or extensions. Now, I know everybody here has heard of the word shaliach, and that's an emissary, and the 2 words are actually related. They both mean kind of like an outreach, like a branch or a way of extending. Anyway, my kibbutz was located near the ancient town of Beit Shan, which is located in the Jezreel Valley, which is in North Israel. When I arrived there, I was just a young guy. I was, I was 21, and I was assigned the back-breaking job of picking peppers all day. It would be like crawling around on the ground for 7-8 hours picking peppers. A few months later, I was promoted, and I was given the job of injecting antiviral vaccine into newly hatched chicks. And if you've ever been cooped up in a chicken coop, you know that wasn't too pleasant either. And then I had one terrifying experience on the kibbutz. It was Shabbat, so we weren't working. And a friend of mine, David, and myself, we decided to take a hike. And evidently, in those days, there wasn't much to do or see. There were a few other kibbutzim in the area, but we decided to take a walk. And while we were out in no man's land, we heard what sounded like firecrackers. But when the dirt started to pop up next to our feet, we realized we were being shot at. So without even looking, just turned around and started to run downhill, falling and scraping. And it was just like a horror show. But because of the fear, I was actually starting to laugh. And it wasn't funny. It was a laugh of extreme emotion. And when we got back to the kibbutz, we reported the incident. They sent out a patrol, a border patrol, but they couldn't find anybody. So to this day, I don't know who it was. it could have been just some Arab. It could have been another kibbutznik thinking we were, infiltrating, but it's still a mystery. Anyway, after a few months, the communal way of life was too restricted. It was too regimented for me, so I left. And I hitched a ride to what at that time in Israel was the end of the world. I went to Eilat. Now, I know some of you, or many of you, have probably been there, but in 1959, Eilat was a lot different than it is today. First of all, there were no traffic lights. There was only one hotel on the north shore of the Red Sea. There was one cafe, and bar. It was called Cafe Sof Olam, which means the cafe at the end of the world, and it was appropriately named. It was a time when camels roamed freely across the airstrip, the landing strips at the airport, and it was a very short landing strip. So the only airline that could go there was Arkia, which still goes there today, but Israel has built, in fact, about 2 years ago, they opened up a new airport in Eilat, and it's a modern airport, so large planes can now land there. So in Eilat, first thing I did, I had to find a place to live, but I had no money. So somebody told me in town that there's an abandoned shack out at what they call Chof Almogim, which means the coral beach. So I went out there and I did find an abandoned shack. Nobody was living in there. It was just, it was a wooden shack, 4 walls and a roof. And it was right off what today is a famous vacation and visitor site, tourist site. Chof Almogim means coral reef. And in a short time, I got a job with a local fisherman catching fish for an unusual reason. These fish that I caught, they were saltwater, colorful saltwater fish that people in Germany evidently were into that, and they were, collecting them and put them in their fish tanks. So I would snorkel among the reefs, catch the tropical fish in a net, take them out, put them on the boat, and then those fish were put into plastic bags with air, and they were shipped in wooden cartons to Germany for the fish enthusiasts who bought it. So the interesting thing about the coral reefs, besides their beauty, is the Red Sea has its share of sharks. So you always had to be on the lookout for sharks. And if you ever heard people yelling on the shore, Karish, Karish, that meant there were sharks sighted. So I was aware of that, and I was always very, cognizant. And one time, something very unusual happened. I was coming out of the water, and something slapped me in the back of the head. I was about waist deep, and I kept walking. I thought, what was that? And then another one. And about 4 or 5 times, I got slapped in the back, and I turned around, and I had never seen this before. It was a school of flying fish that were feeding in the area, and I happened to be in the way. And that was the first and last time I've ever seen flying fish actually in action. Anyway, during my many trips, I met 4 heroes of Israel. All of them were women. The first one, her name was Doda Esther. She's a legend in Israel, and she's since passed away. She was older when I met her. She lived up north in a town called Metula. And what she did, she took it upon herself to open her house for coffee and cake for any soldiers passing through her town. After a while, she became a legend. As a result, the Army brass installed a special secured hotline to her house. So when they knew troops would be passing by her vicinity, they would phone her and she would make sure she had enough cake and coffee and hot chocolate for them. So she's, in a way, she was a hero to all the soldiers that in those years. The second one I met, her name was Sippy, and this was odd. My wife and I were attending a 50th anniversary party at a restaurant called E equals MC squared. And we happened to be sitting at a table with an elderly woman, and we had a nice conversation, just small talk. Later, a friend of mine said, "Do you realize who you were sitting with?" And I said, "No, I don't know her." And he said, "She's a national hero." I said, "How?" During the 1948 War of Independence, when the Arab League declared war on Israel, she, with the surrounding companies, her mission was to drive a truck at night down a hill with the lights on during the battles. When she reached the bottom of the hill, she would turn the lights off and she would back the truck up to the top of the hill. Then she would turn the lights back on and go back down the hill. And she did this repeatedly. And the Arabs were under the impression that this was a whole line of troops coming in. So they turned and fled because they thought they were outnumbered. And they're really outnumbered by a very few, Sippy and whatever few soldiers they had. The third hero, everybody's heard of her. I met at the King David Hotel, actually outside of the hotel, in front of it. Her name was Dr. Ruth Westheimer, the internationally known sex therapist. So she's 4'7". She's easy to miss, but her stature belies her courage. Sadly, her parents had to send her away from Germany after Kristallnacht. They ended up in Auschwitz and they perished. She was saved on kinder transport, and she ended up in Britain, and eventually she got to Israel, and I'm not sure how, and she joined the Haganah, which was the precursor to the IDF, and she was assigned the job of sniper. So Dr. Ruth Westheimer was a sniper for the Israeli Haganah. Later, she was severely wounded in battle by an explosion. She survived it. She ended up with a limp. And the most endearing part of her was, here I was asking, and Bobby, my wife, trying to get questions about her, an internationally known sex therapist, and all she wanted to know things about us. What do we do in Israel? Why are we here? What's our family like? And she wouldn't leave us alone. So that was my experience with Dr. Ruth. The fourth hero, of course, was one of my Israeli grandchildren. Her name is Roni, and she served in the Air Force at a base in the Negev called Hatzarim. And it's not far from Beersheba, if you know where it's located, it gives you an idea. Her job was an electronics weapons warfare instructor for fighter pilots. She taught pilots how to use their instruments, rockets, different things that they did, their radars and so on. So anyway, I attended her graduation ceremony, and there were about 20 of us there, and mostly family. And they asked, does anybody want to try on a pilot's suit? So I volunteered, and they picked me. And let me tell you, it's no picnic. The suit itself weighs about 35 pounds. It has heating in it, air conditioning, and weapons. It also has first aid equipment. And so there I am standing there in a pilot's outfit. They put the helmet on me, and they said, okay, now squeeze into the cockpit of the trainer jet. So, you know, I did. I got in there, but I don't know how they do it, how they breathe. I mean, it is so tight in there, but they manage. All right, I'm going to change wheels now. I'm going to tell you something that you probably don't know or haven't heard. because I didn't until I was in Israel. They celebrate St. Patrick's Day. I don't celebrate St. Patrick's Day here. They celebrate it in Israel. There are no less than 33 pubs throughout the country that are celebrating it. They put up shamrocks, leprechauns, they do Danny Boy songs, When Irish Eyes Are Smiling, everything. So I went with my daughter and her husband, my son-in-law, and and Bobby, my wife, and we went into the bar, and it was packed. It was called the Dublin, naturally, and there were the lasses serving drinks, and in green and you know the whole bit, very Irish, and their names instead of Colleen and Megan and Mary were Shoshana, Rivka, Tal, Judith, and it was like mind blowing. So we managed to get a table, and I went up to the bar to get some beer, and I happened to hear a gentleman speaking, and he was obviously Irish because he had a very thick Irish brogue. So I said, "Are you from Ireland?" And he said, "No, I'm from Portugal." And he cracked up laughing. So I knew I met a comedian. So I said, look, you seem to have a good sense of humor. I want to ask you a question. He said, "Sure. Is it true what they say that St. Patrick became a hero because he led all the snakes out of Ireland?" He said, "It's almost true. He did lead all the snakes out of Ireland except for one, my ex-wife." So anyway, I sent that article to the Philadelphia Inquirer, and they said they need to delete that one line, that story about the ex-wife. They didn't think it would go over too well. So I said, fine. Another interesting thing was I was at a coffee shop, and it's fairly crowded, and everyone's drinking coffee. It was in the morning, and they were having breakfast, and so was I, and I was with a bunch of friends. And all of a sudden, I saw a robot look like a little tractor go down the street, extend its arm, pick up something from the street, put it in a box. And I found out later, I was the only one watching, no one else cared. It was a robot picking up a suspected bomb in the middle of the street in Israel. It was in Tel Aviv. So anyway, there's some of the stories. I'll just try to wrap it up now with, there's so many more, but maybe someday I'll put it in a book. A friend of mine came, he actually lives in a moshav called Amatzia. He made Aliyah like about 60 years ago. He's been in Israel forever. And he said that he hasn't been back to the States for many, many years. He said the startling thing that really struck him, the difference in the culture between the Israeli culture and the American culture was this. When he visited the States, every time he would go into, in Israel, whenever he would go into a store, which I know is true, it happens to me, they always check your bags. If you have a bag, a case, anything you carry, they make you open it up. Women, their pocketbooks, they check it. He said, but in America, he noticed that the only time they checked his bags is when he was leaving the stores, worried about theft. So on the one hand, in Israel, they're worried you're bringing a bomb in, and in America, we're worried that someone's stealing something. So he was just telling me he found that striking. So although I was born and raised in the United States, there is still a part of me that really, whenever I visit, I never really totally leave Israel and I don't think I ever will, because, I have a legacy there now and descendants. And that's my story. There's a lot more, but maybe someday I'll write it and be able to do more. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Yeah, let's take some questions. If you'll, I'll unmute you as you raise your hand or wave at me, either one. Questions, anyone, or comments? I see Eli. Eli, go ahead. Unmute yourself,
I
please.
know Eli.
You
I know Eli, and
Every-
I knew his father. And my daughter lived about 2 miles from where Eli's father was in a kibbutz called Kibbutz Hulda. And I was very friendly with his father, and I was friendly with Eli. Unfortunately, his father is not here anymore, but Eli is. So, what's your question, Eli?
Hello. First of all, I want to tell you, I love everything you said, except one thing. It's not Amatzia, it's Amatzia.
You're right. You're right. And my friend, you know Yair Rappaport. No, you don't know Yair. All right. So my friend Yair, he's from there. He's living in the States now. So I always say Amatzia, but he always corrects me, but I still haven't learned how to say it.
Okay. I just wanted to tell you, when my mother came from Poland, there was a special youth group that left Poland, and it used to call Hachshara. It means they preparing you to come to Israel. And you know where she ended? In Kibbutz Shluchot.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
Now that was she dati? Was she religious?
No.
Because
My mother was religious. My father was the religious guy.
Yeah, because Shluchot was a Bnei Akiva kibbutz. It was a religious kibbutz. That's not why I left, though.
Anyone else for questions? Wave at me, please, or use your raise hand function. Or unmute yourself and say hi. Len Berman, go ahead, Len.
Hi, Len.
Hi, Steve. Steve, why do they celebrate St. Patrick's Day in Israel?
Because there are a lot of Americans, and I guess there's English, and there are Canadians, and there are Australians, and all these people have come from Christian societies where St. Patrick is celebrated. I don't celebrate it, but when I was in Israel, I felt as an American, I had to celebrate it.
Oh, it's fine. You know,
It's kind of weird, but that's the way it was.
I was just curious as to why St. Patrick's Day. All right, thank you.
Anyone
Well, they
else?
also celebrate Christmas, the Christians.
Yeah.
David Singer, good morning.
Good morning.
Go ahead. Nice to see you.
My background is I flew for TWA, so your times in Israel are many more than mine, but I've been there, I think, 35 times, mostly in short layovers. And in the process, I have tried to learn Hebrew, I don't know, half a dozen times and never got past lesson 2. What was your experience with the language? Did you learn it when you were on the first kibbutz, or
Yeah,
did you speak it all the time?
I got the foundation on the kibbutz because I didn't have a choice. There was only one person on the kibbutz that spoke English. He was from New York. And everybody else was either Hebrew, Yiddish, or some European language. I just didn't know. So I was kind of forced to learn. But that was I left Israel the end of 1960. And I didn't go back until 1973. But I thought that, my phone, I thought that it was going to be lost, but a lot of it came back quickly. And then after that, I started to, when I started to go to Israel twice a year, I would stay for a month or two at a time with my kid, my daughter, and as the family grew. So it kind of helped me with Hebrew, more contemporary. There are a lot of changes now and slang now that we didn't have back then, but there was slang back then. that my grandson doesn't know. I know some Israeli slang that he doesn't know, but anyway, that's how I learned Hebrew. I'm not really great at it, but I get along. There's only a few things you really have to know, like where's the bathroom and where different things like
Are
that.
other people getting all this background? Are other people?
I'm muting everybody and then we'll recognize you.
Is everybody getting this noise, this background noise?
Well, I think we're okay now. Steve Schwartz, go ahead.
I just asked a question. I'm getting a lot of background noise, like music and stuff like that. Is anyone else getting?
Well, I've muted everybody now, so we shouldn't be getting any. But David,
Steve Wenick, of all the extraordinary changes that have occurred over the years in Israel, is there any one thing that stands out to you today?
There's been a big shift in population. What struck me was the fact that in addition to Hebrew, English, and Arabic, now you have signs in Russian. So, you know, that kind of struck me and made me realize the degree to which, you know, the population has changed. Also, where my daughter lives in, it's a place called Maskeret Batya. There's a lot of Jews that came from Africa, Jews, and I went to an Ethiopian synagogue on one Shabbat. There were three synagogues. There was a Sephardic, an Ashkenazi, and there was an Ethiopian, all within a block of each other. So I was curious, so I went to the Ethiopian, and I walked in the doorway, and there are no lights on, just windows were open. Everybody was black, and everybody was wearing a pure white outfit, from their the headdress to their robes. And when I went up, there was a man at the door, and he said to me, I just looked in, and I wanted to just go in and observe. And he said to me, he took one look at me, and he said, "Oh, no. He said, you want to go to that synagogue," and he points down the block to either the Ashkenazi or the Sephardic synagogue. And I should have said, no, I want to come in here, but I kind of I was intimidated, I guess, and I just walked away. But it just struck me funny, like he took one look at me and said, no, you don't want to be in here.
That's fun. That is funny. Thank you.
anyone else? Hands up, please. Dick Knopf?
Steve, my name's Dick Knopf. I'm curious as to, with your daughter living in Israel, were you ever tempted to move there yourself with your own family?
Yeah, actually in 1971, we explored the possibility. We had one obstacle we could not overcome. And this was before, I had any family there. We were just going to make Aliyah as a young married couple.
Mm-hmm.
My oldest daughter is severely mentally challenged. And we looked for facilities there that would be able to handle her challenges. There was nothing even close to what we have here in America back in the early 70s. At that time, we decided that, we couldn't do that. And now, of course, as the years went by, her language ability in English is severely limited. For her to learn a second language would be impossible. Just to give you the idea. So we had to send our shaliach or shlicha, one of our daughters, and she put a stake in Israel for us. So now we have quite a family there. So our hearts are there, but our bodies are still in the States, in Galut.
Right. I guess I have another totally different question. and I don't know what extent you want to answer this, but the politics there seem to be quite unusual, or at least it seems that way. Very pluralistic society. Do you think Netanyahu, what is your sense politically? Will he survive this latest round, or is it time for a new leader?
I'll just tell you what my friend from Amatzia. Ellie, you have to understand, I speak some Yiddish, and a Mitzvah, you know what that means in Yiddish. It's a big Mitzvah, so I am still doing that. Anyway, to answer your question, I asked him that. He's been in Israel forever, same age I am. And coincidentally, that gentleman and I were in Eilat in 1959, the same time, but we never knew each other. That we didn't know each other at the time. We never met that we knew of. And in our conversations, we found out that was the case. But anyway, he said that Bibi was a great asset to Israel, and especially with America and his command of English, etc., having, gone to high school in Cheltenham, Pennsylvania. Mm-hmm. But it's overdue. He's ruining his legacy now. And my friend said he should have retired years ago. So I said, yeah, but it seems like you're always voting for him. He said, I vote for him because there's nobody else that really suits him. And then he said, which really surprised me, he prefers somebody more conservative, more to the right wing than Bibi.
Wow.
So I don't understand Israeli politics at all.
And
the fact that he really liked him and he voted for him, but yet he said he's overstayed his and he's ruining his legacy now. It seems like paradoxical to me, but that's the way it is. And in Israel, you could just get an opinion from everybody, and sometimes it's shocking. It's the opposite of what you would think from the way they talk, but right. That's it.
Thanks, Steve. Anybody else? Wave at me if you would.
I'll tell you a little bit about Israel, politics, and Netanyahu. Netanyahu is a strong leader. He looks for the best for Israel. That's what I look at it. I mean, he looks also the best for his pocket too. There's no question about it. Since Ben-Gurion and Begin, that they didn't care for money, there was pure mind to establish the state of Israel. The difference of today, every politician first looks for his pocket. But leave it to the side. I think, first of all, his command in English coming to speak over here in the United States that everybody understands him. That's one of the main things that Netanyahu is succeeding. Second, he has to get away a little bit from the religious party and embrace everybody else in Israel, but they are the only one that's keeping him alive. And it's a shame that things going this way, but the Israelis' mind is we have to talk from strength. And strength is the most important thing because you know who's surrounding us, and we have to be strong. And nobody else, look, Gantz tried to go against him, and now Gantz is falling completely apart. He's done. So that's the way it is. I'm sorry, but we have to be strong, and that's the most important thing in Israel.
Eli, Ben told me the same thing about Ben-Gurion and Begin, that they were pure politicians for Israel, period. They went back to nothing, and today it's all about money. Truman, when he left the White House, he drove home in a car, his own car. He left and went back to Missouri in a car. But today, they don't go back in the car. They go back in the private plane. It's different time, different.
Different era.
Yeah.
Anyone else? Questions?
Yeah. What about Biden now? What are your thoughts about Biden becoming the next president?
Well, this is about Israel, and they're not real thrilled. They're the polar opposite of here. 70% of the Jewish community here voted for Biden. 70% of the Jewish community in Israel, if they were to vote, would vote against him. My personal feelings, I kind of go with the people that have blood and treasure in the game. And I think the Israelis know best what's good for them. They live there. And, you know, we live here and we know what's best for us here. We don't know what's best for Israelis living in Israel.
Thank you.
That's an opinion piece.
Yeah.
Anybody else? Wave at me, please.
Bob Levin.
Rob Levine. Unmute yourself, Rob, please. There you go.
Hey, Steve. I was wondering about the demographics in Israel today, whether the Orthodox, the population is exploding and, you know, where the moderate Jews are and Ethiopians and Russians and what is the demographic look like today?
Well, Israel has a melding pot. It's called the IDF, the Army, the Navy, the Marine, you know, everything. So the young people that are being born there, they're being molded by the majority of the population. It used to be Ashkenazi. It's becoming much more Sephardic now. The influences of the Orthodox it's very strong because of their numbers. They're having a lot of kids, so it's becoming a question of numbers. And the immigrants, a lot of them, they may not be religious, but they go to the yeshiva and they become indoctrinated with, you know, the yeshiva mentality. Not that it's, I'm not saying it's bad, I'm just saying, so there's a tend to do that. Then you have the other polar opposite, where you have the very secular Jews, and they're pulling in the opposite direction. But I think overall, from 1959 to now, I think Israel's much, much more religious than when my experiences then. And I think there's that general trend. That whether it continues or not, I don't know, but that's what I've seen.
Thanks, Steve. Thanks for coming today.
My pleasure, neighbor.
Anyone else?
Yeah, I got another one. If there's ever peace between Israel and the Arabs, will the problem between the secular and the religious Jews become even more of a serious problem, in the sense that, you know, the restrictions by the Orthodox? So will that become more of a serious problem, the peace settled with the Arabs and the problems within Israel?
I think, no, I think if there's peace, as much as people talk, I think everybody wants, at least in Israel, wants peace. And I think that, you know, except for the extreme hardliners, I think overall the general consensus will be that peace should be the main concern for everyone. Because when the terrorists come in, they don't ask, you know, what synagogue you belong to. And they don't even care if you have a kippah or not. If they
Well, is
think
there still resentment?
that's all they need.
If there's resentment between the religious and the secular, where the religious are not serving in the army and everything, they're getting exempted.
Okay,
Yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, that's not true. My grandson and one of my grandson and one of my granddaughters are very religious. They both serve. My granddaughter served with leggings and a skirt and her head covered all the time. My grandson, he's just regular, he's not like a chassid, but he's just very Orthodox. They do serve. Now, there are a segment that do not, and they're very resented by the general population, and they're resented by the other religious too. And there are people, they just refuse to serve. And then you have people like the Satmar and the Turi Kartha that don't even believe there should be a state of Israel until the Mashiach comes, till they build the temple again. So, Jews are Jews. I mean, we're difficult people. Didn't it say that we're a stiff-necked people?
Anyone else? Raise your hand. We'll take one more question. I don't see anyone. All right, let's wrap it up. Steve Wenick, thank you so much for taking the time today to speak with us. Everybody, yes, very good. Thank you. We would like you to come visit us when we get back to live breakfast. So we have a 1-year membership for you. And we will buy you breakfast the first time, or whenever you decide to come back, whenever we're allowed to go back to the JCC and have breakfast, you're invited. Please come see us.
Dave will let me know.
Okay.
I'll bring him.
Right?
Bring him.
David will let you know.
Yeah.
So while I have all you guys here, let's take a minute and Ed Silver's not here today. I think most of you are aware that Ed and his wife Laurie both seem to have COVID. Let's send him our prayers and our good vibes and hope that he's with us the next meeting. I did get an answer from him yesterday by email, so he's not in the hospital. He is at home. I think his son's helping him out with whatever he needs. But let's hope that he's with us the next meeting. I saw Dave Singer here today. Dave, we're always glad to see you. You're recovered. And I don't see Dave Nydorf, but I know he's recovered from COVID. I wanted to take a minute and
Ed, I just want to let you know, I don't think anybody recovers from COVID. Certainly not if they've been in the hospital. There are so many postings on Facebook everywhere about the long haulers, and they cover everything. I have liver disease. They said, no, that didn't have anything to do with COVID. Well, now after another 6 months, they're agreeing. COVID has a lot of effects on the body. They have no idea what they are.
yeah, I think we're seeing more and more articles every day, it seems. Yeah, let's keep our fingers crossed that we get the vaccine here and that nobody else picks it up. I wanted to take a minute and just read you. I every once in a while I see a little article in the newspaper that makes me think twice, and this will just take a minute. And the whole article, it was a full page. It was about various things to do with COVID, but one of them was finding joy while we're going through this and waiting for the vaccine. And I'll just take a minute if you'll indulge me. It's about someone, Eric Pagramonski, a Holocaust survivor, taught his son to find happiness even in the darkest times. Throughout his life, his dad told a story of when he was a child in Lithuania in the late 1930s. One day, an old friend came to visit the family and told them, "Now comes a time of great joy." Someone asked what he meant, and he said, "Every day that we are safe, there will be joy. Every time we can eat and our children can eat, there will be joy. Every day that we survive, moving us one step closer to freedom, there will be joy." My dad survived a concentration camp, and that message was part of what helped him, says Mr. Page, a licensed clinical social worker in New York. So I say to you, every day we get up in the morning that we're well, we're one step closer to being over this. So let's all keep our fingers crossed, and hopefully there'll be a vaccine for us. Some of us are over 75. We're in that 1B group, and then hopefully that 1C group will come along. Lee Yasgur, do you want to comment? Go ahead.
I think that, as a more optimistic, hopeful outlook, the vaccine is now out. The two different companies. The experience so far has been no seriously significant side effects that were not easily managed. People who have bee sting allergies carry EpiPens, and there's only been, in all the vaccinations that have been given within the Delaware Valley, South Jersey, Philadelphia area, one. We're very lucky that it's being, and it was managed. It didn't result in hospitalization. So we're really moving along in New Jersey. Everybody over 75 will probably be able to sign up through a county system by either phone call or online, probably by the end of the first week in January for their first vaccination, and people who are known to have significant medical problems. The doctors, the nurses who aren't frontline are getting their vaccinations beginning Tuesday or Wednesday. The doctors who work in offices, their office staff, is going to be able to get vaccinations. They're projecting by the end of this coming week, after January 1st. And you may hear or read that it's moving along too slowly, but from my perspective, knowing how much has to go into getting a vaccine into a person's arm when you have to have everybody waiting 15 minutes or longer afterwards. So you have to have an observation location, not people sitting in their car. It's really moving along fast. So for the first week and a half that it's been out in New Jersey, there's probably 100,000 of them already delivered. And most of the gentlemen in this club are in an age group or medical care group that's going to qualify for making a phone call, putting their name on a list to get their vaccination during the month of January. Now that's the way I see it. I'm optimistic about it. If you've hit your 75th birthday, you're in that front of the line position.
Hey.
If you've hit your 65th birthday, you might have to wait till February. But you're way ahead in the line, ahead of your children, unless they have medical complications.
Thanks, Lee. Couple more things. The Israeli trip, for those of you who had signed up for it, of course, you know it's been postponed. As soon as we hear something as to Israel opening up, we'll reschedule it. In conjunction with that, we had a bunch of donations. One large one, I think I sent it out to the participants. Don Weisenstein, in memory of his brother Ira, sent us a nice donation. The clubs decided to round up the donations we collected, I believe, $594. We're going to round that up to $1,000 and donate $1,000 to the food bank. There are people who need our help in the Delaware Valley, or as well, I won't say in the Delaware Valley, Burlington, Camden, and Gloucester.
And Ed,
Yes.
thanks for the great job by you and other members to facilitate that. My family is very appreciative.
Thank you. Thanks again, Don. Fantasy football today, tomorrow, the big days. Good luck to everybody. It's moving along. I'm very hopeful. We're playing, I I'm trying to remember who we're playing. We're playing
Ads,
Barry,
Barry.
my friend Barry, and we're going to beat him. I hope, but we'll see. We'll see. He's got some good consigliaries working the rosters for him. So we have to be careful. Anyway, I think that might be all that I have. Anybody else? Raise your hand, please, or unmute yourself and talk.
Ed?
Yeah.
Let me mention for the guys that are into fantasy football, I expect to have the spreadsheet of the payouts out and available within 24 hours after the last game.
Okay, anyone else?
That's much better than CBS.
Dick?
Yeah, I just wanted to mention, my wife and I started to provide groceries through the food pantry to families in and around Camden County. And I don't know if she might be looking for other volunteers. So I just thought I'd mention it if you're interested. There's this lady, Donna Brecker. I guess you can do it through Sherry Jonas at the Children's Family Service Center, Jewish.
Yeah, just give a call over to the JFCS and tell them you're interested.
You're interested, right?
We have a number of members who are delivering food almost on a daily basis to people who are in need.
Right, and the demand is great from what we can see.
Anybody else? Hands? Don again?
One more, not about fantasy football. Actually, I think Nelson might be able to help me. There was something you said about a closed drive, and I had missed it. Is there another date that you're going to be doing that with one of the synagogues, I think?
Yes, Don, great question. We're having another closed drive with the Temple Beth Shalom on January 18th, Mitzvah Day. Okay, they're looking primarily for new clothes, but they'll take anything. So just drop it off at Temple Beth Shalom in Cherry Hill.
Will some announcement go out to our club regarding that?
I'll make sure that happens. Thank you.
Great.
Anyone else? All right, guys. Thanks for coming to the meeting this morning. I hope you enjoyed it. Thanks again. Dave Schwartz has left us, but he's the best. Where could we get a guy who could get a speaker for us in 2 days? He's done a fantastic job all year and continues to do a fantastic job.
Absolutely. Yep.
I want to say, Steve, thank you.
Yes, thank you, Steve.
Sometime get together.
Steve Wenick, thanks again for taking the time to speak with us. We enjoyed it. And
Very interesting.
When that first breakfast come, we're all looking forward to the lox and bagels again. We will give you a holler.
I'll be there.
All right.
That's great.
Take care.
All right. See you, everybody.
Everybody, take care.
Stay well.
Bye, everybody.